thank you everybody for coming along on this gorgeous sunny lunchtime. Do appreciate you choosing to listen to this rather than sit in the garden. So I'm going to just share my screen quickly. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. Okay, and as Jackie says, this is hopefully a positive session. And from my own experience and from working with all sorts of people, I know that positives can come from very difficult situations. And I fully appreciate, as Jackie said, I've had parenting responsibilities. So I do have a little bit of a sense of what you might be going through. So I'm going to skip this, but let's just start here. So what I really hope is that this presentation, this workshop, helps you realize that even in the worst of situations, it could be a really good day. And I just love this quote that's by Mark Twain. So Jackie's introduced me. I am an executive coach. I do one-to-one coaching. I'm also, as a result of a course that we did together, I work with two other coaches and we do a program called Midlife Thriving. So often people that we work with are having all sorts of challenges, Carent related or others, because midlife can be quite challenging, can't it? So I live in Morpeth in the northeast of England, and I do most of my work online, some face-to-face. Just as a quick view, the program I do with the other two coaches, one of them is also a nutritional therapist. So it's all about getting you as fit as possible to deal with whatever comes your way. And it's lovely. We do it in small cohorts. So there's lots of support and encouragement. And we also do lots of other short programs and things as well. One of the things, if you've seen the video in advance, you will have seen this already, but just in case you haven't, but we use for the mental fitness side of what we do with Midlife Thriving, we use the tools and strategies and habits from an organization called Positive Intelligence. What we like about it is it's based very much in science and very up-to-date science. And I'm going to use some of their tools or share some of them with you today because we find them really practical, things that people can just integrate into their daily lives. So it was whilst I was learning about coaching using Positive Intelligence that I met Aaron and Erica, who I do the Midlife Thriving program with. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I was going to have a little chat about our brains. I'm not going to go into any great detail, very conscious that I know Jackie's a doctor who's here who knows an awful lot more about them than I do. And some of you may be neuroscientists for all I know, but I think what's really useful is to have a little bit of understanding about how our brains work, because that can help us make some changes. I'm going to introduce you to saboteurs and SAGE, another positive intelligence concept. I'm going to give you the opportunity to try out a PQ rep. PQ, again, positive intelligence. PQ stands for positive intelligence, one of their tools. And I'm going to tell you a story which will introduce you to another of the positive intelligence tools, which is about the SAGE perspective. And then finally, we'll do an exercise together that will introduce you to the Navigate Power, another tool from Positive Intelligence. So as Jackie said, I'll do some talking, then give you an opportunity to go into breakout rooms and have a chat with each other and see what comes out of that. So hopefully a little bit of interaction today. You won't just have to sit and listen to me. Okay. So our brains, and this isn't our complete brain, but there are two areas of our brain that can have a huge influence on our experience of life. If you're interested in the anatomical areas, those are there. And this is positive intelligence, the way positive intelligence describes it. So on the left-hand side, we've got the saboteur part of our brain. It's probably one of the oldest parts of our brain. It hasn't changed an awful lot since we were hunter-gatherers. And it's really effective and really efficient at looking out for danger. I don't know whether you've ever dropped something without realizing it and caught it before you'd almost realized it had happened. It's the part of our brain, it's part of our brain that works particularly fast. It works an awful lot faster than the other side of the brain, the sage part of our brain. The challenge with the saboteur part of our brain is that because it's always looking out for danger, and we don't face the dangers that we used to when we were hunter-gatherers, that it finds danger in all sorts of places where really it's not that dangerous. And that creates a level of stress, anxiety, and all sorts of negative emotions that can keep us in a negative place when actually we don't need to be. The sage part of the brain, on the other side, is where we're at our most effective. It's where we're really effective at building relationships, good at coming up with solutions to problems. And so if we can use that part of our brain, we're more effective. And also it makes life a more pleasant experience. So the saboteur part of our brain, it motivates us through negative emotions, and you can be very effective working with the saboteur part of your brain. It just doesn't make life the best of experiences. And the reality is most of us, most of the time, leave the saboteur part of our brain to be in control. And but actually life could be much more effective and much happier if we were to let the sage part of our brain run the world. I always think of the saboteur part of our brain, it's a bit like pain. Pain is really valuable to know that you need to do something, that you've trodden on a piece of glass and you need to take your foot off, or you've put your hand on a hot stove and you need to take your hand off. What you wouldn't do with pain, and I appreciate that there are all sorts of situations where you have no choice over the pain, but if it's something like putting your hand on a hot stove or treading on something sharp, you would lift your foot, lift your hand. And the idea of the saboteurs is they're really valuable to tell us we need to pay attention to something. But if we stay with them, it's a bit like putting our hand on the hot stove and leaving it there even though we're feeling the pain. So that's all well and good, but what do you do about it? So we'll come on to that. Just before I go further in terms of what we can do about shifting from the saboteur to the sage part of the brain, another little bit I wanted to talk about was how energy hungry our brain is. And that's really important to know. It uses a huge proportion of our energy consumption each day. And that's because it has so much work to do. And in order to reduce the amount of energy that it could use and to actually get through the work that it needs to do, it takes shortcuts. And a lot of those are what we call habits. So about 90% of what we do is habit. And the great thing about habits, the way I like to think of them, and Jackie will probably wince at this, but I always think of the brain as a bit like a meadow with long grass in it. That if you walked across that meadow in exactly the same way for a number of weeks, you would make a very, very clear path. And then that becomes the easiest way to walk across that meadow. And if you continued walking on it and other people joined you, that path would get wider and wider. So in my head, that's the sort of thing that's happening when you're building new habits, or your brain is using old habits to make decisions and do things. So if you're making a new habit, it feels very hard at first because you're having to create new connections. But the more you practice and keep going with those new habits, they become easier. Just like the grass, if you stop practicing them, they can grow over, shrink, and disappear. But the brain loves really broad highways in which to use to send the energy and make decisions and all those things that it needs to do. So it likes the fact that it can go back to how we've always done things, which is why it makes it quite tricky sometimes to make changes, even when we really want to. So being aware that our brain is always trying to save energy and do things the way we've always done them is useful to know. The other thing that is also useful to know is that our brains, and I don't know about you, but when I was young, everybody used to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And in the last 20 or so years, it's been discovered that you absolutely can. And we all have this, or most of us have this amazing neuroplasticity property, which enables us to make changes in those connections in our brains. So if you want to learn something new, you want to create new habits, we have the capacity to do it. It takes consistent practice, but we can do it. So we're in a position to actually tell our brains we'd like to do something different. We'd like to see different things. I don't know, has anybody ever bought a car and suddenly noticed that on the roads there are lots of cars just like yours that you'd never noticed before? And that's again our brain trying to save energy. What it does, it sees them, but it doesn't put them into the conscious part of your brain because it doesn't think they're necessary. But once you buy a new car, that becomes important, or your brain sees it as important, so it will then show you those cars that have been there all the time, but you just didn't particularly notice them. And similarly, in different situations with people, if you go into a meeting or you have a conversation with somebody, you can find that you both come out with a very different view of what happened. And that's just the things that our brains are picking up on. Doesn't mean that we were in a different meeting. We've just remembered and noticed different things as we've gone through that situation. So we can ask our brain to do different things. We can ask it to help us find different options to do things. And we can ask it to give us a little bit more peace and happiness. So here are some simple changes that you can make from today. There are others that you can do, but I've just brought some really simple ones along that you can start from now. And a big one is gratitude. And it sounds a bit woo-woo, doesn't it, to say that I'm thankful for something. But what actually happens is that helps you shift the energy from the saboteur part of your brain into the sage part of your brain. So just literally starting each morning or finishing each day by thinking of 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for can make a huge difference to how your day goes, because you start in the part of your brain that's going to be constructive and help with relationships and help you solve problems. So getting into a practice of just taking some time to be grateful can make a big difference. There's a really good book by somebody called Caroline Webb that I like, and it's called How to Have a Good Day. And there's a tool that my husband and I often use when we're eating our evening meal. We have a date. So, what have we discovered today? What have we achieved today? And what have we been thankful for and experienced? And just like the gratitude, that's giving an instruction to your brain to look for some good things that have happened in the day, or some positive, constructive things that have happened in the day. And that's a signal for now to find that, but also the brain starts to think, oh, that's more important, and you might notice them. The more you do it, you might notice them more naturally without having to have a date. PQ reps, I'm going to come on to in a second, and we'll have a go at that. And then there is setting intentions. I don't know whether anybody has ever come across that before. And again, it's a bit like gratitude. It sounds as if it's a bit unlikely. But if you decide before you have a conversation with somebody or you go into a meeting how you want to be, your intention. So my intention that I set before I came into today was to leave you feeling that this has been an hour well spent. But you might come in deciding that you want to come across as professional, or you want to come across as caring. And it just helps give your brain an instruction of how you want to be. If you keep doing these, just take literally a couple of minutes a day. It's the consistency of doing them that will build up the difference. Just takes a few moments. You can do it while you boil the kettle. You can do it when you wake up in the morning, as just before you go to sleep at night. You can fit it in with what you're doing anyway. Worth a try. Makes a big difference. So I am going to introduce you to PQ reps, and I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a second. So a PQ rep, it's a bit like meditating. One of the things I really like about PQ reps is there's something you can do anywhere. So if you're in the middle of a difficult situation, once you've learned and practiced them, you can actually do them there and then. So I'm going to start with one that you could do sitting at a table, under your desk, behind your back. If you need your eyes open and you're in the middle of a conversation, which will help you shift the energy again from the saboteur part of your brain to the sage part of your brain. So if everybody's happy to do it, and I'm not going to see whether you're not doing it, so I hope you'll join me though. But if you sit comfortably in your chair, feet flat on the floor, shoulders down, your back against the back of the chair, and just shut your eyes and take 3 reasonably deep breaths. Now, what I'd like you to do is bring the thumb and forefinger on one of your hands together, and very, very gently just rub the tips together. And really notice what that feels like. Can you feel the ridges on your finger and your thumb? What sensations are you getting? Really focus as much as you can. It's very likely you're getting other thoughts in your head, so if you can, push them away and try and focus on your thumb and your forefinger. And again, if any thoughts are coming into your head, try and push them away. Okay, and when you're ready, just open your eyes. I hope as a result of that, you'll have felt a slight shift in your energy. You might feel just a tiny weeny bit calmer. There are all sorts of PQ reps you can do, but that is one that many people find really useful, because you could look as if you're just distracted or not really thinking, and that's what you do if you're having a conversation with somebody. And you know that by focusing on that, you're shifting your attention, and you can be more constructive and positive and come to a better solution if you can keep yourself in the sage part of your brain. So that is a PQ rep. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's a Sophie version of a Chinese proverb, an ancient Chinese proverb, and some of you may have heard it before. And it's about a farmer who has a beautiful stallion, and he decides to take it to the local agricultural show, and it wins first prize. And all his neighbours, who are also farmers, they come and they say to him, "Oh, that's brilliant news. You must be so pleased. How exciting to have won the prize." And the farmer says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" Well, the neighbours just think that's a bit odd, but he's probably having an odd day, so they go about their business. Anyway, news gets around that this beautiful stallion exists and that it won a prize. And a few weeks later, some thieves come and steal the stallion. And the neighbours all come around again and say to the farmer, "You know, our condolences. How awful you've lost that beautiful stallion." And the farmer responds, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And they think he's a bit strange, but off they go and get on with their day. And then a few days later, the stallion turned up. He'd found his way home, and on the way, he'd come across some wild mares, and they'd followed him. So the farmer now had his stallion back, and he had a group of wild mares. And the neighbours came round really excitedly and said, "Oh, congratulations, you've got your stallion back. That's great news." And his response was, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And then the farmer had a son, and the son decided he would try and train one of the wild mares. And whilst he was riding her, she threw him off, and he broke his leg in multiple places, really badly. And the neighbours all came round and said to the farmer, "You know, condolences, how are you going to manage without your son?" And the farmer said, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And the neighbours just thought he was really strange at this point. Now, at this time in China, there was an awful lot of unrest, and the Chinese army needed more people to fight. So one day they came to the village and they conscripted all of the men under a certain age, except, of course, the farmer's son, because with his broken leg, he was no use to them. But the neighbours didn't bother to come round this time. But you and I know what he would have said. Who knows what is good and what is bad? So that's an illustration of the sage perspective. And the sage perspective is that you can find positives in every situation that initially seem bad. It's not that we put ourselves in those positions in order to find something good, because you can find something good without being in a bad situation. Sometimes it can take a long, long time before you can see the positive from a situation. So when I think of a couple of years ago, I had a medical emergency, and one of the positives that came out of that was my husband asked our neighbour whether he would water my tomato plants. And our neighbour is quite elderly, and he'd got to the point where he really didn't have a reason to get up in the morning. But these tomato plants gave him a reason to get up, because he didn't want them to be dead by the time I came out of hospital. And that really kick-started him getting back into the flow of life. So for me, that was a big positive. There were others, but that was a big positive that came out of that situation. And then we can also create positives. And what I created out of that situation was I was actually going to take more notice of my own health, because I'd taken it for granted up until that point. So I've implemented things in my life as a result of that situation that was bad at the time, and certainly seemed bad. And the purpose of having the sage perspective is by actively looking for some positives, and they can be tiny, that come out of a situation. It's like that saying, isn't it? Every cloud has a silver lining. It's looking for that silver lining actually enables you to move forward and to start bringing more positive things into your life. And as I say, sometimes it's immediate, and sometimes it takes an awfully long time before you can see something positive that came out of that situation. And this is on the sage part of our brain, positive intelligence has got 5 sage powers, and I'm going to talk you through the navigate sage power. And what I'm going to ask you to do, and for some of you this might feel a bit strange, but I would hope you will stick with it. What I would like you to do is to close your eyes again, and we're going to do a few more PQs, and then I'm going to ask you to use your imagination for a bit. So get yourself comfortable, feet flat on the floor, shoulders down, and if you're happy to, close your eyes. And what I'd like you to do is to take 3 deeper breaths than normal. And then keep your eyes shut. Just go back to your normal breathing and notice how either your chest or stomach rises and falls every time you take a breath. And try and focus on that. And if other thoughts are coming into your head, that's really normal, but try and push them away. Just focus on noticing your stomach or chest rising and falling as you breathe. And now what I'd like you to do is to bring the two palms of your hands together, and very, very gently pull your fingers, the fingertips of one hand, very gently and very slowly down the fingers of your other hand and over your palm, and just notice all of the sensations as you do that. And then you can swap and do it with the other hand. Really slowly, really gently. And one more time. And now I'd like to introduce you to your elder, wiser self. So I'd like to imagine you a number of years forward, but you're sound of mind, sound of body. And you've had all that additional life experience, and you're wiser than you are now. Just imagine how you might look, what you might be wearing, where you might be, what the room looks like. And now I'd like your current self to go and introduce yourself to your wiser elder self. And what your wiser elder self has been doing has been creating a gallery of pictures from each stage of your life. And she's taking you to the one that's labeled 2025. Now I'd like you to look at that picture and notice who's in it. Are you in it? Who else is in it? What else is in the picture? What objects are there? And also notice what isn't there. What was important enough to record on that picture? And what has got forgotten or wasn't important enough to remember over the course of the years? Okay. Now I'm just going to ask you to go back to your breathing and notice the rise and fall of your chest or stomach. And when you're ready, open your eyes. I find that exercise really helpful to help me step away from the busyness of now, because sometimes we get so wrapped up in all the little activities that are going on, we forget what's important. And by stepping out, sometimes it can help us refocus where we use our energy, even if it's just a little bit, and where we spend our time on the stuff that's actually really important to us. So I've shared how you can create some positives. You can command your mind to spend more time in sage by gratitude practice. You might want a date, discover, achieve what you achieved, what you're thankful for, what you've experienced. Or you might want to learn to do more PQ reps. And also setting your intentions before you do things can give you more control of your mind so that you spend more time in sage than in Saboteur. Really looking for gifts or creating one from bad situations can also help feel a little bit more positive. And taking time to step back and work out what's important to you about this time of your life. And just seeing whether you can focus more energy or more attention on that. Our minds are a garden, and we can decide whether we grow flowers or seeds or weeds. Thank you really very much for listening and participating. A lot of this is about creating helpful habits. We have a free ebook if anybody wants to scan that and download it. You're very welcome. If you've got any questions, I appreciate I've not allowed time today to ask questions, so I'm very happy to be contacted by email. My email address is there. or if you're on LinkedIn, contact me by LinkedIn. I'm very happy to have a conversation that way. So I hope you found the session helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.